Hello Booktube, I am back with another recent reads video to talk about some more of the books I read recently. I've got a lot of reading done recently, so I've got some things to talk to you about. The first one is one that I accidentally left out of my previous video because I'd already read it. That's Welcome to Lagos by Chibundu Onuzu, which is a story, as you might guess from the title, about the Nigerian city of Lagos, and more particularly about five individuals who end up in Lagos after the first part of the book and kind of have to find their feet and work their way through life in Lagos. Enjoyed it a lot, although I didn't manage to fully connect with the characters. They are quite well drawn, and you really get to know them and see their life in this huge city. It reminded me slightly of Dickens, although I'm not quite sure why exactly. It's just this weird feeling in the back of my head. So in terms of style, it's certainly not like Dickens, but there are some similarities in kind of looking at life in a large city and looking at people in kind of the underclass of society and how they live and following their adventures. Although there's less of the kind of Dickensian irony and sarcasm and caricatures to kind of poke fun at society. And one other thing I really liked about this book is, especially the second part, each chapter starts with these little epigraphs, which are fictionalized or fictional, taken from the Nigerian Journal, which is a fictional newspaper in the book. But each chapter kind of has a little paragraph from this fictional newspaper describing a societal or systemic problem in Nigeria, and then the chapter that follows it kind of shows what that means on a personal level, right? So it kind of connects, like unemployment statistics, which are just numbers, with one very personal story of what it actually means to be unemployed in Lagos. I really like that approach of showing these large-scale problems and systemic problems, but also the personal impact and connecting those two sides of looking at things. Yeah, all in all, an enjoyable read. Gives you a nice picture, as far as I can judge, of modern day Nigeria and what life there is like. So definitely worth your while. Then the next book I read, or at least I want to talk about, is The Dawn of Christianity by Robert Knapp, or Robert Knapp. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce his name. Knapp, probably. This is a non-fiction book about the rise of Christianity. And although that's not entirely right, what it's more about is kind of the world in which Christianity came to being, in the sense of the social and religious organization at the time, and the religious experiences people had, and how far Christianity fit into that or not. So it goes into quite a bit of detail. It looks kind of divides everyone up into two categories, which is maybe a bit broad, because so the one category is the Jews, who are monotheistic, and then he talks about polytheists, which encompasses all manner of religions. Of course, the reigning Roman and Greek pantheons of the day, but there are all kinds of cults and subsets and different religions within that. He doesn't really go into much detail on that. And there's only so much you can fit into, 250 pages or so that this book is. But I can imagine if you have a bit more knowledge of that, it might be a bit of a too broad brush treatment. But what is very interesting is he kind of sketches out what religion meant to people at the time and what they sought from religion and how they experienced religion, which is quite different to the way that we now think of religion, especially if you've grown up in the West and with kind of a 2 millennia long tradition of monotheism and of religion as a force for moral teaching and coming with certain dogmas and required beliefs to a certain extent, which is quite different from how, say, the ancient Athenians perceived religion, where it was much more about attending festivals and events to be part of a community and trying to influence supernatural forces to give you a desired outcome. So he talks a lot about those kind of ideas and how Christianity fit in with what people thought about and wanted from religion at the time, and how it was different. And gives, I think, a very nice picture of kind of the world, and especially in the Levant, or the Eastern Mediterranean, where Christianity started off, what it was like in terms of people's thoughts, let's say, and beliefs. So that was very interesting. Where it lacks is that it doesn't really explain how Christianity managed to take off and how it managed to evolve beyond being just one of the dozens of sects and cults floating around at the time. So I would really be interested if anyone else could follow up that answers that question. I would definitely be interested in reading it. And yeah, if that's really the question you want answered, you're not going to find it in this book. But for just a view of what the ancient Mediterranean was like in terms of religious beliefs and how Christianity fit into that, definitely a very interesting read. Then back to fiction with Shishaku Endo's The Samurai, which is a historical fiction novel about a group of samurai who travel eastwards to first Mexico and then later Spain and even Rome on a diplomatic mission to set up trade relations between Japan and Nueva España. This was the time, so roughly what we now call Mexico. And if I put it like that, it sounds like a kind of historical adventure story, travelogue, which it isn't really. It is an historical fiction book in that sense. It's actually based on a historical event and historical people, but it is really much more about, nice slide into this book actually, it is about Christianity and about faith and about the different forms faith can take and what people seek and get out of their faith, and also about the use of faith and kind of the blurring between religious, pure, quote-unquote, unselfish motivations and selfish, political, secular motivations, and how they blend together when religion becomes organized. So if you're expecting kind of a historical fiction adventure novel, you're in the wrong place. But if you're interested in a character-driven, more meditative story that happens to take place in a certain historical period, and some meditation on faith and what it means to people, definitely worth read. It's a very kind of sparse and austere style, mainly driven in kind of the descriptions of the landscapes they travel through. So the titular samurai is a low-ranking samurai. He's the lord of this little patch of marshland where people can just barely grow enough rice to feed themselves. And you have these very kind of almost depressing, but in a kind of sparse way. I don't know if I've seen some Japanese movies where you have these kind of creeping landscape shots where it's kind of a very harsh, sparse landscape, but there's a beauty in that, and that kind of made its way into this writing as well. So definitely worth read, but not if you're looking for a historical adventure novel. And then a little snack in between was Jorge Luis Borges's The Garden of Forking Paths, which is one of these Penguin Modern collections. It's a short story collection, it's about 4 or 5 stories in here. And count? Yes, 5. One of which is only 1 page. And they all play around with kind of reality and the boundaries of reality and what is real, what is dream. It's a very small collection just to give you a little taste, but I enjoyed the stories in here, and I'm glad that I later also got another book of collected short fiction by Borges just sitting on my shelf over there behind you, and I'm looking forward to reading that based on these stories. And then the final book I have to talk with you about today is Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep, which is the first of his Philip Marlowe novels. And it's kind of one of the foundations of the hardboiled detective genre, I would say. So just for that reason it was an interesting read. I also quite enjoy kind of the film noir, which isn't quite, but I guess, but that kind of atmosphere, the film noir atmosphere, the the hardboiled detective. I like that. The style of the book, the prose styling fits within that very well, like the metaphors that are chosen. It's interesting that although the main title character is Philip Marlowe, is kind of struggling private detective. He's kind of has some contacts with upper echelons of society, but certainly doesn't belong to them. But he does kind of seem to have a classical education here and there, and uses some kind of quite educated metaphors, which makes you could say it's maybe unrealistic, because why would the character that you get of Philip Marlowe, why would he know these things? But it kind of fits with him, and it kind of gives a little twist to the descriptions and elevates him a bit, and makes it a bit more intriguing, because it gives Philip Marlowe a bit more depth, right? You realize he's not just some dumb PI plodding around. So yeah, I really enjoyed the book, despite some very much of its time, or even worse, attitudes with regards to women, and also with regards to gay people. I think it says enough if I tell you that the book does censor out the word fuck, but it doesn't censor the slur for gay people. So that gives you an idea of how the book feels about that. And yeah, the women, if you've ever read any Hemingway, I found a lot of similarities in how the women in Hemingway are treated compared to the women in this book. They're kind of airheaded creatures that need a man to show them the way and maybe give them a few good slaps if they're being too hysterical. Or they're like these evil manipulatrices that bind men around their fingers with their sexual powers, or maybe both at the same time, even though that's somewhat contradictory. So yeah, definitely something that you have to kind of push through reading the book. But if you are able to, that the rest of the book was a worthwhile read. But I can understand if some people say, well, don't feel like dealing with that. I'll find myself a more modern hardboiled detective that doesn't come with that baggage. But I think definitely just the fact that this is such a foundational book to a genre makes it worthwhile to read, and as a portrait of society at the time, or a certain view of what society was like at the time, it's also a very interesting read. So and yeah, it certainly also kept me on my toes. It kept me wanting to read to find out the resolution of the plot. So despite the issues I had with it, I still had an enjoyable time with the book. So that was everything I had to discuss with you for this time. If you've read any of those books or have any thoughts about them, please do leave them in the comments down below. And hopefully I'll see you again quite soon with another bunch of books I've read. Until then, thanks for watching. Bye bye.